You check the read receipt. 3 minutes. Now 5. Your chest tightens and you don't know why. You tell yourself you're being ridiculous. You're not. Your brain is doing exactly what it's built to do. You probably think this is insecurity, something wrong with you specifically. Low self-esteem, the kind people say you should work on, not clinginess, not weakness, not a personality flaw waiting to be fixed with a self-help book.
Here's where it gets complicated. In 1995, psychologist Mark Leary proposed something called sociometer theory. Here's the idea. Self-esteem isn't a measure of how much you like yourself. It's a gauge, a meter running quietly in the background of every interaction, tracking one thing and one thing only, your relational value to the people who matter to you. Think of it like a fuel gauge. You don't consciously check it every second, but when it dips, you feel it immediately, and you act on it before you've even named what's wrong.
So what's actually happening when the gauge dips?
Leary ran experiments where people were placed in group tasks, then subtly excluded, rejected outright, just quietly left out of a conversation or told a group didn't want them for the next round. And here's the part that matters. Self-esteem dropped in real time, not after the rejection was confirmed, before, on ambiguous signal alone. The gauge doesn't wait for proof. It reacts to risk.
And it's not just measuring that risk abstractly somewhere in the back of your mind. In 2003, neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger put people in brain scanners and had them play a simple ball tossing game with 2 other players, then had those players quietly stop throwing to them. The scan showed something strange. The brain regions that lit up during that small social exclusion were the same regions that light up during physical pain. Not similar circuitry, the same circuitry, repurposed. Your brain doesn't run a separate system for left on red and stub your toe. It's the same alarm, wired for 2 very different emergencies.
That's not a flaw in the system. That's the system working exactly as designed. Because for most of human history, being excluded from your group wasn't an inconvenience. It was a death sentence. No tribe meant no food, no protection, no one to notice if you didn't come back. So evolution didn't build a gauge that waits for certainty. It built one that fires on the first hint of distance. Because by the time exclusion is confirmed, it's often too late to fix it. So what does this mean for you in 2026, staring at a phone? Your sociometer has no idea it's living in a world of spotty signal and someone driving with their phone in their pocket. It doesn't know the difference between actual disinterest and stuck in a meeting. It just registers a drop, a delay, a shorter reply than usual, a read receipt with no follow-up, and it treats that drop as real. The same ancient circuitry that once tracked your standing in a 50-person tribe is now running on a notification. Look, it's not just texting. The typing bubble that appears, then disappears twice with nothing sent. The joke that gets a half laugh instead of a real one. The meeting where nobody looks at you when you talk. The group chat where everyone reacted to the message above yours and skipped yours entirely. None of these are proof of anything. Your gauge doesn't deal in proof. It deals in signal. And it reacts first, explains itself later.
It shows up at work, too, and there it gets sneakier, because you can't just blame a bad signal. You send a proposal and hear nothing back for 2 days. You replay the meeting where you pitched the idea and nobody built on it. They just move to the next agenda item. Your gauge doesn't know the difference between everyone swamped this week and everyone quietly thinks less of you now. It just clocks the silence, and silence reads as data. So you start narrating. Maybe the proposal was bad. Maybe you talked too much in that meeting. Maybe they're being polite about it. None of that is information. That's the gauge filling a gap with the worst available story. Because a bad story still feels safer than no story at all.
You're not weak for feeling it. You're not too sensitive. You're not broken. It's a mechanism, a gauge doing its job in an environment it was never calibrated for. Here's the part that reframes almost everything. The gauge doesn't announce itself as sociometer activity. It shows up disguised as a thought. They're annoyed with me, I said too much, they're pulling away. And because it feels like a thought, you treat it like a conclusion instead of what it actually is. A reading. A number moving on a dial you didn't choose to install, responding to the same threat your ancestors felt when the fire circle went quiet as they walked up. Knowing that doesn't shut the gauge off. It still fires. You'll still feel the tightness in your chest the next time a reply takes too long, and that's fine. That's not a failure of insight, that's just what a gauge does. But there's a difference between feeling a reading and believing it's a verdict. And that difference starts the moment you can name what's actually happening in your body, instead of narrating a story about why they don't care. Tonight, when your phone sits there unanswered and your stomach does that small, familiar drop, that's not a character flaw lighting up. That's not proof of anything about you. That's a gauge, doing exactly what it evolved to do. Badly calibrated for a world of delayed texts instead of literal exile. That's the mechanism. That's all it is.